So I think that it's very important, first of all, that the manager or the coach, head coach, take the confidence from must win the confidence of the players. I think that the decisions must be together, but it's true that in one timeout, like I told you, at least in handball, it's around 40 seconds. You cannot ask to everyone to take one decision. Like they say, I think that there are one plan in the timeout. You must say some very concrete things, send one message from the tactical or strategical point of view, one emotional message. Also, I think that it was very important what Dave said. I think that that was great comment from Dave. And to ask to everyone is difficult. I think that's why it's important to plan the timeout, maybe to make consensus with one of the leaders. If the timeout is from your side that is in attack, to consensus with the leader of the team and ask his opinion. And after, you are who has the responsibility. After, if you lose, everybody will say that you are the bad coach. So you take the decision that you think that is the best for the team. And also to ask if it's in defense, if ask the timeout the other team, to ask to the leader in defense to see what is the best option, the best solution, because this leader inside of dressing room, everybody will follow and everybody will go 100% with you and with the leader.
Thank you, Xavi. Dave, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. I think I've been, I'll take the question about, I'll address the issue of players first, and then if I may talk about assistants briefly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, players, I've probably, the majority of the timeouts thousands of timeouts I've probably called or been involved in, the worst ones are where you do a good job as a head coach, and your voice comes over clearly and simply, and you think you've got your message across, and right as the players are just about to go back on the court, one of the players says something that totally undermines what you just said, and everybody walks out onto the court confused or in different states, and I think that sort of haphazard player contributions can be really damaging. But Xavi said, if you've got a key player, particularly if it's a captain or lead, somebody the players respect and really buy into, if they're reinforcing the same message, it can be powerful. But you need to ensure that connection is there, which you might not be able to do if they've just walked off the court into a timeout. How do you know that you're on the same page, and how can you trust that they're going to give the same message or reinforce the message? So that would be something you need to kind of almost practice or plan, rehearse. I think the other thing about who else might be involved, so the other thing would be assistants. And again, I've been in the opposite role of being an assistant, where head coach has led a timeout and almost towards the end have looked at me and gone, "Got anything to add?" And I was like, "What?" Yes, you sort of, again, throw something in, you're not quite sure if it's valuable or not. And again, that's just poor planning. And I think the most effective timeouts, if you watch like the NBA, they have longer because they're TV timeouts, but what typically happens is the timeout's called, the coaches huddle up together, and usually got like 25 coaches, they huddle up together, but you know that they've all got clear roles and responsibilities, and actually what's happening there is probably quite a sophisticated conversation about what's the message, who's going to deliver it, and what's the most powerful information to connect to it, and then they go and do it. And sometimes it might be that you turn that over, so you hand the tactic board to the assistant and say, "You deliver it." I think it's really important. There's probably a really clear voice in the timeout. If that's a player, great. If it's a head coach, great. If it's the assistant coach, great. But it shouldn't be all three. There shouldn't be a mixture of voices, I don't think, unless you're really clear that you can reinforce the message.
Thank you, Dave. Sean?
Yeah, no. To be fair, no, they covered a great deal there. I would just add, going back to understanding your players and yourself and where you can have an impact. So anything behavioural, I would question myself whether I, or perhaps a captain or a leader, would be best placed to deliver that message. If my job is to say, "Come on, lads, up and at 'em," and come on, let's make sure we give 110% and all that, I don't think I'm doing my job. I haven't done my job. I'd rather, we have values as a group. I'd rather see a senior player or the players collectively come together and recognise that situation because we prepared and planned for it, because we understand how we need to be as well as what we need to do in that moment. So I would be, I would, goes back to that planning and preparing. At what point and when in a timeout can I have that impact? And as an assistant, at times I think, if I know the head coach is addressing the 5 on the court, then I might have an opportunity where I can talk to pick off an individual that perhaps isn't on the court that might have a role to play in this situation over the next few minutes. So trying to be clear as a coaching staff, as a technical team, where we can add value, not there in the moment, as Dave said. You get the one that comes left side in terms of last minute. If that did happen, I probably wouldn't add anything because it's probably only going to add confusion or value. Or less value, sorry. So having that preparation, having that plan, and understanding when your players can really start to add value to the situation is important. And that goes back to practicing that and recognizing who can provide information in a concise way that provides that shared understanding when they go back on court.
Cool. You're all mentioning the preparation and the pre-planning of your timeouts, which is key, and I agree with you in my own experience. But Xavi, in one of his interventions, mentioned something quite interesting, which is you don't know when the opposite team is going to ask a timeout. What's your stance in preparing for that? Is that something you take in account when you're planning for your sessions, when you're talking with your team? Is it something you only discuss with your staff and kind of have some pointers pre-planned for those moments? What's your strategy for that, Xavi?
I think that this is a very good question, no? Because I think that it's easy to prepare the timeouts when something is going out of the match plan, no? But because you can expect you are who asks the timeout. The question is, like you said, when the opponent asks the timeout, no, and surprise to you. Okay, what can I say now, no? So I think that here, when the opponent asks the timeout, is for two reasons. One, because the match is going out of the match plan of the rival, so that means that it's going good for us. So if it's going good, we have two options: to continue in the same way, or to try to change from the strategical point of view, because we know that the coach will try to give some solutions of the problems, and maybe we can surprise, also offering some changes and making that this time out it was for nothing, no? This is in one way, and in the other way, I think the following what Dave said, to continue giving one emotional message to make that the players don't go down and continue in this way, especially these things, no? But from the tactical point of view, I think that we have two options: or continue like we are, or changing everything to try to make that the timeout of the rival it's absolutely different. That is clear is that when it's going good for you, the matches are like this. Sometimes it's for you, sometimes it's for the rival. When it's going good for you, it's impossible that all the match will be good for you. Will be some periods that the rival will be better, and I think that in these timeouts we must keep the attention and the concentration of our players, because it's very difficult or almost impossible to keep the concentration in one match that it's so long and so tough.
Thank you, Sean. You give us your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, isn't it? We can plan and prepare for what we do as much as we want, but we generally won't have too much of an idea unless we know some trends around our opposition. I think we've got to be careful we don't just fill space and create air as coaches, or hot air as coaches if it's not necessary. So going back to the previous question, there may be an opportunity to pick up some of the information from our players. Again, going back to our leaders in that situation, because as coaches in the moment we can get quite intense, and we're not feeling what the players are feeling. So if things are going well and we're quite, come on, we need to be on it. We need to make sure we're pressing hard. We need to make sure we're doing this, that, and the other, etc. And the players are like, well, we have to. There's got to be an element of trust as well, and having an understanding of our players. So that might be an opportunity in which to bring them in. I'm always, and this is how you create space for this. I'm not entirely sure, and I certainly haven't got it nailed, but trying to plan ahead and understand. So if I'm watching the game like a supporter or a fan, or if I'm watching the game and I'm watching it as in there's a pass there, or that was a good pass, or a nice bit of play there, a nice attacking 1v1, a nice back post ball, I don't think I'm doing my job again. So my job, I believe, is around the context of the game in its whole, and starting to think about being proactive, think about anticipating, because in that very given moment, that the players are in control of the game. The players are in control of the game. So I'm thinking about how are we feeling? How are we thinking? And then I'm trying to do the same for the opposition. And that includes things like their timeouts and trying to understand why they might have it. So again, I might use an assistant, or I might use a player to start to reinforce some key messages around an opponent's timeout, where I'm starting to now size up what's going to come as a result of that. What have I seen in the last 5 minutes that might start to influence what we do? It might be that I start to go and address a different 4 players. So actually, I might leave the captain with the 4 that are on the court, or my assistant with the 4 on the court, and I might go and start to address another 4 players, because I've started to identify or observe trends in the opposition, or after their timeout, and trying to be quite proactive and deal with whatever they're throwing at us. So yeah, just trying to shine a slightly different lens on it, I guess.
Thank you, Sean. Dave, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think so. Just one thing first, which is this is my favourite part of coaching, like trying to outwit my opponent, the opposite coach. Try to get ahead of them, stay a step ahead of them tactically in the game, and so this is the bit that really, I really love this aspect of coaching. Just to build on what Xavi said, he felt there were 2. If you think about it, there's probably 2 reasons why the opponent's called a timeout. I might add a third. And if you kind of, broadly speaking, if you know why they've called a timeout, you can preempt what's going to happen in that timeout. And you can almost like think of what the counter response will be. And so the 3 that I would offer would be, so one reason, an obvious reason might be a tactical change. So let's say my offense is breaking down their defense quite easily. They call a timeout. It's a good bet that they're going to change their defense. So if I think they're going to do that, I'm going to use my timeout to say, let's be prepared to observe their defensive system. And if they change to this, well, let's do that. So I'm trying to stay ahead. I'm trying to help the players think ahead and stay ahead of the opposition. If I think it's a momentum stopper, so if they've simply called timeout because they're trying to stop our momentum, I'm going to remind my team why we have it. So I'm going to use my timeout to remind them of, we've got momentum because we're doing this, and this really well, and let's keep doing it, broadly speaking. And if I think the opposition coaches, this is probably the third one, which Xavi didn't mention, and Sean mentioned this before, it depends, kind of get to know your opposition coaches. So if my opposition coach was now Alex Ferguson type, and I feel that they've called the timeout to give them a hairdryer, so I know that these guys are getting a hairdryer in their timeout, what am I doing? I'm preparing my players to respond to that, because they're probably going to come out fast, hard, aggressive, more physical, more on the front foot, and we can use that. So if they're hyped up and on the front foot and trying to block out every shot, shot fake, go by them. So I'm preparing the players to respond to what I think is likely to happen. So I love that aspect of the timeout. For me is like, I'm almost more interested in the opposition timeout than I am mine. I know what I'm doing with mine, but if I can stay ahead of the opposition when they use theirs, we're winning. We're good.
I think it's. I was just going to say, I think it's really, really important to manage those situations. So just to elaborate there, Dave, almost like asking the question. So what are the behaviours if we're preempting some of that hairdryer and the reaction that's going to come? What are some of the behaviours that we need to really consider in this moment? As a result, what are some of the decisions we're going to be making in that moment in terms of managing that? And are we are we as coaches just going to say, well, things are going well till this point, so we're going to continue? That might be the solution. That might be the answer. Or actually, is there some other knowledge that we're starting to observe and draw in that suggests just for the next few minutes we might need to do X because of Y? And I think it's a really good point you raised.
Thank you, guys. That brings us to a question that was made via email prior to the start of this of the webinar. Someone asked, obviously, sometimes we ask timeouts, and we have to focus on a less positive situation to promote change. So we're going to focus on a couple of mistakes in defense, maybe, so that the players notice what's happening and change positively. And sometimes passing or focusing a bit on the negative side tends to bring the players as well to a bit of a negative context. So how could you pass a negative message? Negative is obviously a bit strong, but how could you pass a message based on a negative example and give the players the confidence, the trust to go out thinking, okay, you know, this timeout wasn't just to hair dry me Alex Ferguson style. He used it to do that, but I improved, and that's going to be reflected on my game. So how would you behave on that sort of context? Dave, I don't know if you want to start with this one.
Yeah, I'll just give you one, rather than give you a general response, I'll give you a very specific example. It's one that so a friend and colleague of mine, Sergio Larrabefiala, Spaniard, he coaches junior basketball in this country, coaches in Manchester Magic, and he's very successful. He often takes his team to national championship finals and so on. And he has a really nice idea I like called a intensity marker. And what that is so during their practices, they've got some sort of, as we most have, like some sort of standard core practices that they use. And some of those are what he calls intensity markers. So the practice is designed to get the players playing at a level of intensity, physical intensity predominantly, that they need to reach in games in order to be successful. And they practice that, and they know, so what they're practicing is how that feels. And so what he'll often do is if he feels his team isn't playing with that degree of intensity, or that's an issue on the court, he'll call a timeout and he'll draw their attention back to the thing that they've practiced. So he'll return them to the intensity marker and say, you know that drill that we do or that practice, we're not there yet, are we? So he'll use that as a reference point to, provoke them. So in a way, it's a negative message because he's drawing on the fact that they're not there, they're not where he wants to be. But what he's got is this nicely sort of ready-made, well-practiced reference point for where they need to be, and it reminds them and brings them all back to that kind of shared point, what does that feel like? And then they go out on the court, and often it's pretty successful. So it's something he shared with me that I like the idea of.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. Xavi, can you hear us?
Well, yeah, of course.
No, sorry. Yeah, you were frozen on the image, so I was wondering, but you're fine now.
Okay, so I think that during the match is not the moment to send a negative message. No, I think that you said in the timeout, even during the match, you need the players 100% or 120% in the top form. Maybe after the match you can regret to the players everything that you want, but during the match you cannot push down one player. By the way, from my point of view, be coach, it's a lot of things, no? And one of the things is the psychology, no? I think that it's very important to know good your players. The players are humans. Every human is different and react different depending of every situation. There are players that they need that you push them hard. Then I think that you must know which are these players that you must really push them during the match, and which players, there are players that you cannot push them because they are not enough strong in their heads, and when you push they go down. And in the match you need everyone, because the goal is one common goal, that is to try to win the match. So I think that you must use different strategy, individual strategies depending of the player. but I have clear that.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I think we touched on it at the start. The comment was, yeah, I think Xavi said it. You know, if they're not 100% with you, or if they don't believe in your message, you're going to struggle. So unless you understand why you're using that tactic in terms of getting a specific response out of an individual or a couple of individuals, again, it probably might be something for later. But that doesn't mean you can't grab their attention. That doesn't mean there's not perhaps your own intensity marker within the timeout itself. I think there's something about sharing the language as well. So instead of you, it's we. Instead of I, it's us. You know, and being sharing the situation, sharing the challenges with them, and trying to support that with them. I think it depending on the state of the game and depending on your players, you know, you might need to get to some specific nuanced tactical action quite quickly, whatever it may be. But certainly in the developmental context and arena, it might be starting to ask questions that they come to that conclusion themselves, and that's far more powerful than perhaps us spending a minute trying to put something across to them in quite a stern way that just doesn't hit the mark. So it might be linked a little bit to Sergio's intensity marker that Dave said. What's the language and what's the question structure that we're going to have in that 1 minute? What are we going to do to elicit that information in a way that's going to cause a reaction? And a specific example, I had a specific player who is a coach, and I always knew he was going to be a coach that had a particular personality and a particular level of respect because of the level one that he played, and he was an international player. That at our club level, if I needed a message along those lines to be shared, he is who I would call upon. Because, yeah, I could do that and certainly can go a little bit higher on the intensity if I needed to. But again, I believe it had far greater impact and far greater value because of, I suppose, the way in which he was held in esteem by his peers. And I think, yeah, just being able to understand the different tactics that you can apply within those timeouts and what's around you is also really important. This is not just about the coach and their 1 minute or 2 minutes. There's a whole other load of factors that we need to consider.
Thank you. Guys, we are up for time. I wouldn't let you go away without one more question. And that question is, and for our coaches to take away, what's the absolute no in a timeout? What's the key thing you would tell, never do this when you ask a timeout? Xavi, I don't know if you want to start with that. What's one thing you would say, never do in a timeout?
I think, like we spoke about it before, I think that you cannot push down your players. You must know your players. You must know how to motivate. To somebody can be screaming and saying really bad words, and to another one, maybe you must kiss. So I mean that for sure, at least in my case, I will avoid to push down the players. I will try like Sean and like Dave said to give very concrete instructions, because there are no time almost for nothing. And I think that to send also one emotional message to the players, like Dave said.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I think that would be so many out there, but I think the main thing would be don't call a timeout because you're pissed off, which happens a lot. I think, like the coach is angry, the coach is emotionally pissed off about what's going on, and calls a timeout because they're pissed off, not because of any of the good reasons we've talked about. I used to work with a coach who did that regularly, and then actually when the players came in, he didn't really know what to say because he didn't have anything to say other than just to tell them how pissed off he was, which was totally useless. So, yeah.
Good one. Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I'd probably just say have great clarity around why you're calling a timeout and what you're hoping to achieve from it, and measuring the success of it. And I guess just another little one is just around, don't regret not taking your timeouts afterwards, because I think you're just going to end up wrapping yourself up in knots a little bit. the bigger bit comes to the way in which you prepare your players and your team as a whole, and being able to deal with those situations in the moment.
Perfect. Guys, I know we are a bit over and we have no more questions come in. So I would like to close this by thanking you all. It was an amazing experience. And I'm sure I've learned a lot and reflected a lot on my own practice, and hopefully the other coaches will have done the same. Apologies from Bobby's part. He struggled with the internet. He was supposed to direct the conversation. I'm sure he would do a better job than I did, but he's been struggling with his Wi-Fi today, so he couldn't help us. But he obviously thanks you as much as I do for everyone who assisted the webinar. Thank you very much, and we'll be back next Friday with Matt Joseph, the coach developer for the FA, around about how we can best support the coaches in our clubs and in our pathway to develop. So thank you very much, guys. Stay safe. Hopefully enjoy the weather where you are, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, Xavi. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Dave.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.